January 11th, 1944, Mission 182, 8th Air Force. The winter over Germany is brutal. Heavy cloud layers, drifting snow, and turbulent winds that scatter formations and force escort groups to fight just to stay in contact. Over the Ruhr Valley, black flak blossoms erupt across the sky as hundreds of B-17 flying fortresses press east toward Oschersleben, Halberstadt, and Braunschweig. It is the deepest penetration into the Reich attempted so far, and the Luftwaffe is ready. Just 3 months earlier, on Black Thursday, the 8th Air Force lost 60 bombers in a single mission. Without long-range escorts, the flying fortresses were slow, predictable targets. The P-47s and P-38s simply could not stay with them to the target. But today is different. For the first time in meaningful strength, a new fighter accompanies the bombers from England to the heart of Germany and back. The North American P-51 Mustang. Among the Mustang pilots is a quiet, composed 30-year-old major from St. Louis, a man other pilots described as ice-calm, detached, impossible to rattle. Major James H. Howard. His silver Mustang carries the Chinese characters Ding Hao, very good, call sign, Dong Dong. He is not loud, not dramatic, but he is known for a simple truth. When the shooting starts, Howard goes forward. As the bomber stream approaches Oschersleben, approximately 30 to 40 Luftwaffe fighters, Bf-109s, FW-190s, and twin-engine Me-410 Zerstorers, drop out of the clouds in a coordinated high-altitude ambush. B-17 radios erupt. Bandits! 6 o'clock high! They're coming through the box. We're losing stragglers. Cloud turbulence and combat joined confusion momentarily separate much of the Mustang escort. One bomber group, the 401st Bomb Group, finds itself exposed. Dozens of German fighters pivot toward them. Then, from below the formation, a single silver Mustang climbs into view. Howard keys his mic, calm, level, almost understated. Dong Dong here, I've got them. Howard inverts, dives, and hits the enemy head-on. His .650 calibers tear through a Bf-109. A second fighter spirals away trailing smoke. German pilots scatter in disbelief. No one charges this kind of numerical disadvantage. No one. Howard immediately exploits the P-51B's strengths, its superior climb rate, high-altitude power, and exceptional energy retention. He zooms upward, reverses, and slashes down through the German formation at angles they cannot counter. His attacks rip apart their timing, forcing them to defend instead of striking the bombers. Inside the B-17s, gunners watch the lone Mustang carving through the Luftwaffe. Who is that? He's breaking up the whole attack. He's everywhere at once. Tracers crisscross the sky. Enemy gun passes dissolve into chaos. And then, Howard's guns fall silent. He's completely out of ammunition. Dong Dong, you're dry, his wingman warns. Break off! Break off! Howard does not break off. He advances again, unarmed, bluffing, diving, cutting across attack runs, placing his Mustang exactly where the next German pass would be fatal to the bombers. The Luftwaffe hesitates. They assume he still has rounds left. He doesn't. He simply refuses to abandon the men flying behind him. A B-17 tail gunner later said, "We thought he was insane, until we realized he was saving all of us." For over 30 minutes, according to multiple bomber crew reports, Howard single-handedly suppresses wave after wave of German attacks. One Mustang, against more than 30 fighters, and the bombers survive. Slowly, the attack collapses. Fighters break away, reform at a distance, or simply disengage from the unrelenting Mustang that will not yield the sky. The B-17s drop their bombs on Oschersleben, mission accomplished. Only when the last German fighter disappears does Howard turn west. His Mustang is riddled with holes, fuel dangerously low. He nurses Ding Hao across hundreds of miles of hostile territory and lands with almost nothing left in the tanks. That night, bomber crews write in their diaries, "Today we saw the bravest thing any man has ever done in the air." Howard's lone defense did more than save the 401st Bomb Group. It proved, decisively, that with the P-51 Mustang, deep penetration daylight bombing was now survivable. For the USAAF, this changed everything. The long-range escort gap was closed. German industry was now vulnerable everywhere. Air superiority over the Reich was no longer theoretical, it was achievable. Howard's action became the most famous single-pilot engagement of the European Air War, earning him the Medal of Honor, the only one awarded to an 8th Air Force fighter pilot. On January 11, 1944, more than 30 Luftwaffe fighters attacked over Oschersleben. One Mustang answered. The Luftwaffe has long been forgotten. The Mustang is not. Major James Howard is now alone, above the Ruhr. 11 miles below lie the factories of the Reich. Behind him, the B-17s of the 401st Bomb Group, still under heavy attack. Ahead, a wolf pack of more than 30 German fighters, maneuvering for the kill. And in that moment, Howard glances at his ammunition counters. All 6 guns read 0. Winchester, completely dry. Any sane pilot would break away, save his aircraft, and live to fight another day. Howard pushes the throttle to the firewall and charges straight into the German formation. The power of pure aggression. To the Luftwaffe pilots, the sight is incomprehensible. One silver Mustang dives toward them with the fury of an entire squadron. Wings flashing in the winter sun, propeller carving white spirals. 3 Bf-109s instinctively roll away from a head-on pass. 2 FW-190s abandon their firing runs. Even a rocket-armed Zerstorer breaks off rather than risk collision. Howard learned this years earlier over the rice paddies of China. Attack so hard and so fast that the enemy never gets the chance to think. The bluff. He streaks through the first wave, holding his Mustang rock steady, as if lining up the perfect deflection shot. German pilots flinch and dive away. No one wants to eat 650 calibers at point-blank range. Howard never fires a round. He doesn't have to. The reputation of the P-51 does the shooting for him. Inside the bombers, waist and tail gunners watch in stunned awe. Waist gunner, voice trembling with excitement. Everywhere you look, there he is. Diving, climbing, cutting them off. I swear there's 3 or 4 Mustangs up there. Tail gunner. No, it's just one plane. The Germans begin to suspect. Minutes drag into 20, then 30. Howard's guns have been silent far too long. Some German pilots start to wonder. Others still treat the lone Mustang as lethal. The uncertainty itself becomes his most dangerous weapon. 3 Bf-109s try to box him in. Howard rolls inverted, drops under them, then climbs into the sun, blinding his pursuers and breaking their attack. A burst of 20mm rips past his cockpit. Another stitches holes across the port wing root. Oil streaks the fuselage. The canopy spiderwebs with a crack. Ding how! Shudders but keeps flying. The Merlin's still roaring. Howard never wavers. Every time a German lines up on a bomber, the silver Mustang appears out of nowhere, cutting across his nose, forcing him to brake. More than 30 minutes of impossible courage. For over half an hour, one man in one airplane holds an entire Luftwaffe assault at bay. No bullets left, no wingman, only speed, skill, and absolute refusal to quit. Slowly, incredibly, the German attacks lose their edge. Some pilots run low on fuel. Others simply refuse to re-engage the madman who will not leave. One by one, then in groups, they turn away. The sky begins to clear. Howard's battered Mustang slides into loose formation with the bombers he just saved. His voice comes over the radio, quiet, almost casual. Dong dong to bombers. Looks like they've had enough. Take care of yourselves going home. The replies flood in, voices cracking with emotion. Whoever you are, thank you. God bless you, whoever that was. You just saved every one of us. They still don't know his name, but they will. Because what Major James Howard did this day, alone, unarmed, for more than 30 minutes against overwhelming odds, will soon be read by the War Department, confirmed by dozens of eyewitnesses, and rewarded with the only Medal of Honor ever awarded to a fighter pilot in the European theater. The B-17s fly on. The Luftwaffe is broken for the day, and high above the Ruhr, one limping P-51 turns west for England, carrying the bravest man most of them will ever know. January 11th, 1944, late afternoon. 37 minutes, more than 30 enemy fighters driven off, 0 rounds left in the guns. High above the Ruhr, the sky falls silent. Major James Howard's Ding How limps along the bomber stream. Wings hold, oil streaking the fuselage, canopy cracked. The Luftwaffe is gone. The B-17s are still flying. Inside the bombers, men stare at the lone silver Mustang and try to understand what they just witnessed. Inside Sir Baboon Magoon. Sergeant Roy Martin, intercom, voice shaking. I thought we had a whole squadron up there. Turns out it was one guy. Just one. Lead bomber, squadron commander. Escort pilot, identify yourself. A pause. Then the calmest voice on the frequency. Howard. Major James Howard. One Mustang. I did what I could. The long flight home. Oil pressure fading, engine running hot. Howard nurses the Merlin across 400 miles of winter sky. A returning P-51 pulls alongside. Wingman. Jim, you look like hell. Howard. You should see the other guys. Boxted Airfield, England. Dusk. The tower sees smoke and calls the crash trucks. Howard lands hard. A shredded panel spins away across the concrete. The Mustang rolls to a halt. Ground crew rush up expecting blood and shock. Instead, Howard climbs down, lights a cigarette, and wipes oil from his face. Crew chief. Jesus, Major, what happened to your airplane? Howard. Ran into a little trouble. That line will be repeated in every bar in England for the rest of the war. Debriefing hut. 1 hour later. The room is packed. No one speaks until Howard finishes. Enemy strength? 30 plus. Duration? 37 minutes. Support? None. A young pilot blurts, "You were out of ammo. Why didn't you leave?" Howard looks at him for a long second. "Because if I left, they would have died." Silence. Then someone whispers, "He held off the entire Luftwaffe, with nothing but guts." 2 days later, 8th Air Force Headquarters General Jimmy Doolittle reads the stack of bomber crew reports, every one of them saying the same thing in different words. "We owe our lives to that one Mustang pilot." He underlines a single sentence in red, sets the paper down, and says quietly, "Give that man the Medal of Honor." It will be the only one ever awarded to a fighter pilot in the European theater. German radio intercepts later confirm even the enemy couldn't believe it. One frantic transmission, caught by Allied listeners. "Ein einzelner Mustang, der ist verrückt." They never learned his name, but the bomber crews did. And 60 years later, old men with trembling hands would still stand a little straighter when someone mentioned Major James H. Howard of the 356th Fighter Group. Because on January 11, 1944, one quiet pilot from St. Louis proved that sometimes raw, unrelenting courage is the most terrifying weapon in the sky. End. 3 days after the battle over Oschersleben, the airbase at Folsham is buzzing. Mechanics still examine the shredded Mustang, shaking their heads in disbelief. Pilots retell the story in mess halls like a campfire legend. Bomber crews, still alive because of one man, send thank you messages and personal letters. The name Howard spreads through the 8th Air Force like a whispered miracle. But Major James Howard himself? He keeps a low profile. He attends briefings, he files reports, he checks on the maintenance of his battered Mustang. He eats quietly, alone at times, preferring calm over celebration. He flew one of the greatest missions in aviation history, and acts as though he simply filed paperwork. At the headquarters of the 8th Air Force, senior officers sift through the incoming eyewitness reports. One colonel reads aloud, "He protected the entire formation, alone, for 37 minutes. Another adds, "He continued the fight without ammunition." A third report reads, "He repeatedly attacks superior numbers with no regard for personal safety." The pile grows thicker. General Carl Spaatz, overseeing U.S. strategic air operations in Europe, soon hears the story. But when the summary reaches General James "Jimmy" Doolittle, the legendary leader of the Doolittle Raid and commander of the 8th Air Force, he pauses. Doolittle is not easily impressed. He has seen bravery. He has seen sacrifice. He has seen pilots risk everything. But this is something else. A staff officer hands him the final confirmation from multiple bomber groups. Major Howard prevented the destruction of the formation, single-handedly. Doolittle looks up. Write it up for the Medal of Honor. The room falls silent. Because in the European Air War, the Medal of Honor is almost unheard of. Thousands of pilots fight. Thousands die. Many show courage beyond measure. But what Howard did, no one else had done. He didn't just fight. He changed the outcome of an entire mission, alone. Before an award like the Medal of Honor is approved, an exhaustive verification begins. Teams interview. Pilots, navigators, bombardiers, waist gunners, tail gunners, radio operators, even ground observers. The testimonies are astonishingly consistent. One B-17 radio operator says, "Every time I thought we were done for, I saw that Mustang blaze through the sky like a guardian angel." A tail gunner recalls, "He flew so close to us, I could see the holes in his wings." Another witness states, "He fought like he had 10 guns instead of 4. And most shockingly, only after the Germans broke off did we learn he had no ammunition." The verification team eventually concludes, this was the greatest act of aerial bravery witnessed by any bomber group in this theater, and that becomes the foundational sentence in his Medal of Honor package. When Howard's commanding officer tells him the recommendation is going forward, he reacts in classic James Howard fashion, with understatement. "Howard, I just couldn't let those boys get shot down." No boast, no dramatic flourish. Just a simple explanation from a man whose courage surpasses ego. A fellow pilot laughs afterward. Howard acts like he fixed a flat tire, not fought 30 Jerrys alone. January 1944 turns to February, then March. By mid-spring, word arrives. Major James Howard will receive the Medal of Honor. It will be the only Medal of Honor awarded to a fighter pilot in the entire European theater of World War II. The ceremony takes place in England. Photographers crowd around. Reporters fill every available seat. Bomber crews, men whose lives he saved, stand proudly, packed shoulder to shoulder. Howard walks onto the stage, uncomfortable in the spotlight. He would clearly prefer to be in a cockpit than under the glare of cameras. General Carl Spaatz reads the citation. "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty, Major Howard single-handedly protected a bomber formation from attack by 30 enemy fighters." As Spaatz continues, the crowd grows still. Even hardened veterans wipe their eyes. Spaatz finishes, "His skill, courage, and aggressiveness were beyond praise." He places the Medal of Honor around Howard's neck. Flashbulbs explode. Applause erupts. Bomber crews shout his name. But Howard simply nods in quiet acknowledgement. He isn't thinking about glory. He's thinking about the mission. He's thinking about the next flight. The story hits American newspapers like wildfire. Headlines include, "Major James Howard fights Luftwaffe alone," "A Mustang against an army," "One pilot saves a bomber group," "Hero of Oschersleben." Life magazine runs a full spread. Stars and Stripes calls him the one-man Air Force. Back in the States, families of bomber crews send him letters. Some send photos. Some send heartfelt thanks. One letter from a mother reads, "My son came home because you refused to leave him. We will never forget your courage." Howard writes back to every letter he can. Weeks later, Howard visits the bomber group he rescued. The moment he arrives, dozens of airmen rush to greet him. One gunner grabs his hand. "You saved my entire crew." Another embraces him. "You're the reason I get to go home." A pilot shakes his head. "I've flown 100 missions, never seen anything like what you did." Howard seems overwhelmed. He answers them all the same way. "I just did my job." But they know better. He didn't just do his job. He redefined loyalty. He redefined courage. He redefined the role of a fighter escort. The U.S. Army Air Forces begin rewriting training doctrine. Aggression wins fights. Howard's phrase becomes a fundamental principle for escort pilots. The concept of unwavering bomber protection, no matter the odds, becomes standard. And Howard's example teaches generations of aviators a lesson that transcends aircraft, altitude, and era. Sometimes one person's courage can protect hundreds. Sometimes one pilot can change the course of a mission. Sometimes the thin line between survival and annihilation is just one Mustang. But the story isn't over. In the final chapter, we examine Howard's legacy after the war, how his Mustang stand shaped modern air combat doctrine, and why his name endures as one of the greatest fighter pilots in history. Major James Howard's daring 37-minute battle over Oschersleben becomes the stuff of legend almost overnight. But what happened after the Medal of Honor ceremony is just as important as the fight itself. Because Howard's actions didn't simply save a bomber group. They changed the trajectory of air combat doctrine. They reshaped how the United States viewed fighter escorts, and they left behind a legacy still studied by aviators today. This, is the final chapter of one of the most extraordinary missions ever flown. In the weeks following the ceremony, journalists bombard Howard with interviews. They expect confidence, swagger, maybe even showmanship, the traits common among many fighter aces. But Howard isn't like that. When a reporter asks, "Major, how did you find the courage to fight 30 enemy fighters alone?" Howard simply replies, "The bombers needed me." He never describes himself as brave, never exaggerates what he did, never paints himself as invincible. He emphasizes the importance of duty, the responsibility of escort fighters to protect bomber crews at all costs. Another reporter presses him. "You risked your life for nearly 40 minutes. Weren't you afraid?" Howard nods quietly. Everyone is afraid. Courage isn't not feeling fear. It's doing what you must, despite fear. It is the kind of answer that turns soldiers into legends. The 401st Bomb Group, whose lives Howard saved, commission a hand-painted nose art tribute on one of their aircraft, a P-51 Mustang diving down, guns blazing, with the words, "For Major Howard, our guardian." Every crew member signs it. Some include personal messages. "Thanks for my second chance at life. You kept us flying. We'll tell our families about you." Howard visits the bomber group one last time. Men line up to shake his hand. Some simply salute. Some embrace him. Several cannot hold back tears. A bomber pilot tells him, "I lost friends on Black Thursday. I was ready to die over Oschersleben. But then I saw your Mustang. You brought us hope when we thought hope was gone." Howard's response is characteristic of the man. "I just couldn't let you down." As the war progresses, Howard's philosophy becomes standard operating procedure. Training manuals incorporate a new principle. Escort fighters do not leave their bombers, under any circumstances. This becomes known unofficially as the Howard Rule. Instructor pilots use his story as a case study. How one fighter can disrupt a superior enemy force. How aggression can override numerical disadvantage. How psychological pressure can replace firepower. How initiative wins air battles. Howard's mission shifts the Air Force's understanding of aerial intimidation. Attack so relentlessly that the enemy assumes you are more powerful than you are. This doctrine becomes a cornerstone of fighter tactics in Korea, Vietnam, and beyond. After World War II, Howard continues serving in the newly formed United States Air Force. But he never becomes obsessed with fame. He never markets himself. He never cashes in on his Medal of Honor. Instead, he spends his time training young pilots, teaching discipline, humility, and aggression, reinforcing the importance of protecting fellow airmen. He becomes a quiet mentor, valued, respected, admired. One student pilot recalls, "He didn't talk about being a hero. He taught us how to survive. He made us better aviators." Howard eventually retires from the Air Force as a brigadier general, not because he wanted the rank, but because others recognized his leadership. In retirement, Howard is invited to air shows, aviation museums, and symposiums on air combat. He rarely talks about medals or kill counts. He talks about brotherhood, the timeless connection between men who trust each other with their lives. When asked late in life about the mission over Germany, he says, "I did what any fighter pilot should do. If you see someone in trouble, you help them. Simple as that." But the simplicity is deceptive. Few would have done what he did. Even fewer would have survived. Howard's humility becomes legendary in its own right. The P-51 Mustang he flew on January 11, 1944, nicknamed Ding Hao, is preserved and restored, displayed at aviation events as an icon of bravery. Visitors remark on the holes still visible in archival photographs. Shot through the wing root, shrapnel damage around the canopy, oil streaks along the fuselage, bullet impacts near the cockpit. Every mark tells a story. Every scar is proof of his refusal to retreat. Modern fighter pilots still study Howard's mission. Instructors emphasize 3 lessons. 1. Aggression wins fights. Howard's most famous quote, "Aggression wins fights," is taught as a principle of aerial combat psychology. Seizing the initiative breaks the enemy's rhythm. Unchecked aggression can neutralize numerical disadvantage. 2. Protecting allies is a fighter pilot's highest duty. He showed that a fighter is not just a weapon, it is a shield. Howard's refusal to abandon the bombers sets a precedent still honored in the Air Force today. 3. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's commitment to a mission. Howard's ability to keep fighting after running out of ammo is perhaps the clearest illustration of true battlefield resolve seen in the European theater. In one of his last interviews, reflecting on the Medal of Honor, Howard said, "I don't think about awards. I think about the men who made it home. If they lived because of what I did, that's all that matters." It is the perfect epitaph for a pilot whose courage outflew every enemy in the sky. On January 11, 1944, 30 German fighters attacked an American bomber formation. One man stood between them. For 37 minutes, Major James Howard fought, bluffed, and outmaneuvered the Luftwaffe, alone, ensuring the bombers survived to strike their target and fly home. Historians call it the greatest single-handed fighter action in the history of aerial warfare. Not because of the odds, not because of the medal, not even because of the heroism, but because it shows what one person, with the right training, the right aircraft, and the right heart, can do when the world is falling apart. James Howard proved something timeless. Courage is a force multiplier. One brave man can be worth 30, sometimes worth far more.